Welcome everybody to another episode of On the Bench Live. And today our guest is none other than Chris Buck of
Hello.
Buck and Evans.
Ah,
Great Fretwork Fridays YouTube channel. Chris, how are you?
not too bad. Thank you for having me. It's
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
I've been looking forward to this, which is a backhanded compliment because I've been looking forward to anything that just doesn't involve sort of staring at the same four walls, to be honest. So,
Yeah, well, I mean, your four walls look pretty nice. It looks like a cozy place to write, to play.
it's
How have things
been,
been?
yeah, good. I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head, really. I think as four walls go, it's not too bad. It's definitely could be worse places to be stuck for 3 months. And it's been trying to make it as conducive and as comfortable, and as just like I said, conducive to being creative, I guess, because it's as soon as you have nothing else to do, I guess you put a level of expectation upon yourself to suddenly be creative, and suddenly be churning stuff out, and to use this time that you wouldn't have maybe had ordinarily to suddenly put to good use. And having intentions of doing that and actually doing that are two very different things. So I've tried to sort of not put too much pressure on myself in regard to, you have to do this, or this is the time you have to start. Because I think, that's the reason I became a musician in the first place, was to avoid proper work. So I don't want to make,
We all did.
too many restrictions on myself. But no, it's been good. I've been busy. I've been filming, we were saying just before we jumped on the live stream, Friday Fretworks, every one of those I've ever shot pretty much has been shot in the week that it's been uploaded. So
Yeah.
it keeps me on my toes, if nothing else. But suddenly having all this free time to suddenly kind of put to good use, I'm about a month and a half in advance of the episode, which will be airing this Friday. So it's given me a little bit of kind of leeway and a bit more freedom to actually hopefully make them better quality, which hopefully seems to have been reflected in the sort of subscriber increase during lockdown. It's if nothing else, it's just people bored with nothing to do, I guess. So
Yeah, I mean, everybody is stuck at home, and things have been easing a little bit, but you never know if we're going to get stuck at home again. And we're going to talk about your guitars, we're going to talk about your amps, your pedals. I know you play with Helix a little bit, HX Stomp, HX Effects, things like that. But I guess just let's talk about being at home and your creativity. And everybody gets the free time now, but it's kind of hard to self-motivate a little bit. So how have things been for you in that respect? Have you kind of come onto a little bit of writer's block, or have you really kind of dove in? What has been your process lately?
it's sporadic at the best of times, I guess. And I guess the nature of being a musician or any kind of creative person really is that it's not, in very rare circumstances anyway, it's not really a tap that you can turn on and stuff comes out. It's a little bit more kind of random than that. So I think I've been pretty lucky. I think the way I write, original music for Buck and Evans is, I've never ever once in my life sat down and thought, right, I'm going to write a song. Because if I've tried to do that, the last thing you will end up doing is writing a song. And if you do write something, odds on it'll be terrible. So pretty much every Buck and Evans track I've ever written, or any track I've ever written, actually, for that matter, has been me just sat playing the guitar for the fun of it, and something will come to me. It'll be recorded as a voice memo on my phone, whether it's a chord progression or a melody or a riff or something. And then I leave it there ordinarily, unless I feel so inspired to try and put it all together there and then. I'll leave it just as a voice memo, saved invariably as cool idea, or kind of, worth revisiting or something like that. And then I'll come back to it when I'm feeling a little bit more inspired, or as it usually happens, I'll come back to it when I'm feeling less inspired, when I'm kind of scratching around thinking, right, nothing's coming to me today. What can I do? And I've got this kind of bank of stuff kind of saved up, which gives me a little bit of a leaping off point. And if that helps to kind of get the kind of wheels greased, and gets me going, then that particular day, then fantastic. If not, then I'll try tomorrow. So writing, I've tried not to kind of think about it too much in that respect, because I think it's one of those, as is any kind of creative endeavor, it's very easily overthought and very easily killed dead in the water before you've even started, just through overthinking it. So the writing side has been as normal. The the Friday Fretworks, the trick with that is thinking of new ideas for something every week. It's, you know, it's each episode, generally speaking, is between 8 and kind of 12 minutes, I guess. Last week's was a bit of an anomaly. That was 40 minutes, but that was a,
Mhm.
you know, kind of gargantuan effort compared to my normal stuff. So yeah, keeping the ideas flowing for that can be a little bit more of a kind of grind. And not just keeping the ideas flowing, but making sure that they are interesting and they're engaging and you seem enthusiastic about it. When sometimes the last thing you want to do, or the last thing you feel compelled to do, is sit in front of a camera and try and look enthused about something.
Yeah,
So
it's
that,
hard.
yeah, it is. It's,
Yeah.
you know, kind of keeping motivated in that respect has probably been the trickiest part of lockdown, but that's nothing particularly unique to lockdown, to be honest. That's every other week of the year anyway. So in that respect, the kind of greatest thing I've had to overcome is just the fact of not being able to leave the house, really, and kind of, I think, subconsciously or not, a lot of the kind of creativity that comes to me maybe is just through going out for a walk or going out for a drive or meeting up with friends. You know, whether I'm playing music, doing something actively creative and interesting, or whether I'm just playing FIFA or wasting hours of my life on the PlayStation. You know, I think that's such a kind of integral part to any sort of balanced life, you know, kind of fun to work ratio. And I'm very lucky in that, you know, the two are very kind of interconnected for me, I guess, in that I love what I do. I genuinely love what I do. I'm incredibly lucky in that respect. And I'm very fortunate to turn my passion into a career. So keeping those two things kind of separate enough to sort of make sure you're creatively inspired, but still sort of have some level of distance between them can be a little bit tricky every now and then, especially when you're just confined to the same four walls, like you said. However nice those four walls are, it's still the same four walls, you know.
Sure, yeah. Well, a lot of folks that play guitar as like their hobby and things, and
Yeah,
they're creative in their free time because it's fun. But I think
yeah,
a lot of people, even in all walks of life, will be here at home and kind of have a tough time self-motivating and things. But I like your kind of approach to it, where you're saying, oh, I take notes of whatever idea. Of course, you're never next to the recording desk when the
yeah,
great
yeah,
idea comes out. So you pull out the phone, and
yeah.
thank God for that, right? It's great having just a little voice memo, or the music memos now is really handy.
I used to
Uh,
go everywhere with a tape recorder prior to any kind of decent voice memo thing on my phone years and years ago. I used to carry a little tape recorder around with me where I'd just stick an idea down and then come back to it later if I hadn't erased it accidentally by the time I found it again. So
yeah.
yeah, I
Oh, I have
mean,
one of those. From Home Alone,
oh
the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
toy thing. Yeah. I got one of those for Christmas one year. That was like the greatest thing ever. I wish I still had it, because over the holidays, I remember rewatching it with my wife and stuff, and I was just like, I had one of those, and that was like one of the early, where they call it like the dictaphone, right? It's
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
dictate to it. But that's great, and yeah, I mean, I love watching your Fretwork Friday videos. Especially, I was just watching one on fuzz pedals and things.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm a big pedal nerd and things as well. Yeah. So what's been on the docket? What have you been playing through?
Honestly, I mean, a bit of everything and anything, really. I think, you know, it's the kind of the age-old predicament, really, of not being able to make too much noise in the house, you know, because of neighbors and just being generally courteous to the people around you. So the Helix has had a hell of a lot of use. I found myself plugging into the THR really frequently throughout lockdown. It's funny, I was reading some comments recently on a video. I did a video about the THR, kind of, you know, tackling its kind of capabilities as a practice amp and beyond, you know, its ability to record and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and read some of the comments. Generally speaking, I try and stay out of the comment section unless it's kind of questions directed at me,
That's
because it can be a bit of a mess,
yeah.
you know. And for some reason, I revisited that video recently, and it was someone. That was it. You don't get notifications for YouTube comments on threads, so someone can leave a comment, and then other people reply to that, and I don't see it.
Yeah.
So
You don't
you know,
get
you have to
updates.
kind of
Yeah.
revisit them to see them. And I found this thread, this kind of, you know, really long thread discussing whether you know, someone like myself or Pete Thorne, me and Pete
Mhm.
did a video out at Toman in Germany a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
or last year actually, that's flown by, where we kind of had a bit of a shootout of small practice amps, and the THR10 came out on top. And there was this big discussion going in the thread. It's all well and good. People like Pete and Chris saying how good these amps are, but you can guarantee they never use them. And I'm sat there reading these comments while I'm plugged into the THR, and it's kind of like, well, I wish you could see me now. I'm sat there. It's the most convenient thing in the world, So the THR has got a hell of a lot of use. I've been doing, just honestly anything and everything that sort of inspires me, really. Whether it's sort of cranking up a valve amp for 5 minutes while you can get away with it, or more than likely using the Helix at 3 a.m. when you're filming. So
little headphones and things. Absolutely. I mean, you turned on the THR right before we started.
It's my monitor for this video.
Yeah, I love it. It's great. I mean, I had one of the first THR10s, just like the classic, and that's my bench amp at the shop. So, when I was building your guitar, that's the first thing I hear it through. So we have them all over the place. They're really, really handy. And, everybody tells us they use them on the tour bus, or they use them as, their home practice amp, and you could use it with headphones. Now the new one has Bluetooth. So like, it's really killer. Like, you could just use it as a, home speaker. But I love the Bluetooth part because, like, you can jam along to a track. So
sorry, I'm cutting across you, man. It's such a versatile bit of gear. Like I said, it's my monitor for this video because I was trying to wire this all up before we started, and I was using Zoom as a bit of a sort of bench ground to just double check everything was okay. And for that, you had the option to use my interface, but use the built-in speakers within the Mac. And then we log into this, and it's not there. So it's like, quick, I need a speaker, THR.
Yeah. Boom.
So, it's absolutely brilliant. It's such a great bit of kit. Funny talking about it, I can't remember the last time I charged it. So if you disappear at any point during this meeting and the battery, I'll rush somewhere, but I'm sure it'll be good.
Well, let's there's a couple of questions here, and everybody, please, chime in the comments. I'll show some of them. We got a little hello from Nepal. Hey, how's it going, Harry? That's awesome. Hello from Joe DeSalvatore. All right, so let's see here. Chris, what's your favorite Yamaha release of the last 5 years?
I guess this isn't allowed. Honestly, it would, taking the custom shop out of the equation for a second, and it would be the 502, the Revstar 502. I had the 502T in Racing Green, or whatever the official name is, for a good while prior to getting the standard 502. I loved the 502 with the big 502T with the big tailpiece. But getting the standard 502 with the wraparound bridge was just a game changer. I fell in love with that from the moment I had it, and I've used it ever since, and this is having this is a total dream come true, because it's just the sort of evolution of that, I guess, for me, with a couple of very subtle tweaks, but been inundated with questions ever since you very kindly made this for me in regard to when is it going to be released to general public. So I've been fending off answers ever since, but it's obviously very heavily based on that 502. I love I don't know whether you can see it behind me there, that's the 720.
Those are great.
Lurking behind the power cab, that's a fantastic guitar. I've got the Lola
Lollatron.
Got the Lollatrons in there at the minute. They sound fantastic.
And the Lollar P90s are in the gold top as well, which are excellent. I mean, the reason we make both the 502 and the 502T are because they are a little bit different sounding, right? So
absolutely.
The tailpiece lends a little bit more of like this airiness to it. It has a little bit different vibratory character to it, and the wraparound is more for, the whole idea behind Revstar was this idea called utility, right? And it was about something that's beautiful but utilitarian. So that means it has to be simple and to the point, but still really, speak to you when you play it. So we chose the wraparound tailpiece for those because we're like, okay, the fewest number of parts, just the most streamlined. So that's why we went with that. And then we've made many different iterations with, the tailpiece and like the tunematic style, bridge,
Yeah.
or we've done like the Bigsby tailpieces and things as well. And we're constantly evolving those things. But you chose the wraparound. And is there something specific about the wraparound where it was just like, oh, I really needed this piece of kit, or
Yeah.
I feel more comfortable with it for a certain reason?
It's strange. I think obviously having the 502 and having got so used to that in shot black, I've always been a big fan of wrap over tail pieces anyway. And it wasn't until I had this and did a video about it and released that, and was amazed to see that they kind of seem to divide opinion a little bit. People either love wrap over tail pieces or wrap around, or they hate them and kind of prefer the sort of stop tail.
Sure.
And people, as people do on the internet, get very opinionated in regard to which one is unequivocally the best. Because
Yeah.
of course, opinion and preference surely can't enter into the conversation. So I was amazed to see that there was such a kind of strong feeling towards wrap over tail pieces or against them, And I've always loved them. I think there's something happens with that direct connection with the guitar, with the kind of posts going straight down in the body and the strings being directly connected and wrapped around that. I think
Yeah.
I'm not a physicist, as people go to great length to point out on Friday Fretworks. Whenever I get into this stuff, I don't understand it well enough to sort of elucidate to any great degree, but I think there's definitely a connection between having the strings kind of, wrapping around that, and that's the only point of contact they have aside from the nut, really. So I
Yeah.
think there's a definite kind of immediacy you get, and I think the next rabbit hole for falling down is exchanging bridges, spending a bit of time with different manufacturers of bridges and seeing if they sound different, and all
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. Because again, depending on what you read, people have their favored preferences. So
Yeah, so we do a few different versions of the wraparounds, and kind of like you said, you like the bridge, just like one bridge and the nut, so like the strings kind of have this like finite, start and end point, and there's not that travel of string behind the bridge.
yeah,
Those strings behind the bridge also ring out, so
yeah,
they add a little bit of overtone to your sound.
yeah,
Um, so we were talking about this with Mickey Santa Maria last week about
yeah.
his bass being two pieces of wood. It's the neck and the body, and that's it. So I am a big fan of doing things as simply as you can. Now, your guitar is like a normal Revstar. It's a mahogany body, it's a mahogany neck, and then we did an ebony fingerboard with the inlays there, and then it's a normal maple top. It's actually a pretty nice, flamey piece under there, just in case you ever change your mind. Yeah,
Oh,
well,
no, wait. I'd always wondered what the top was like underneath, because it's the shame of old gold tops from years go by. This sort of uncovered. It's that kind of expectation of, is it going to be mismatched? Is it going to be plain? Is it going to be flamed? So that had always intrigued me.
yeah, I always it's not like this big crazy master grade piece of flame maple, but it is nice enough that if you were to change your mind and go for a transparent color, it's doable.
Oh, awesome.
I keep that in mind. Although I do like using ugly pieces of wood too, or quote unquote ugly pieces.
Yeah.
Because they do sound the same, and beauty's in the eye of the beholder, right? So
Oh, absolutely.
I always think something that looks like a barn find is cool to me.
Yeah, totally.
I've made some guitars like that too. Just because I don't want to waste wood or waste material. We're trying to be as eco-conscious as we can.
Yeah.
Your guitar is a little different because it's chambered. Typically, the normal Revstars are not chambered, but yours has been chambered a little bit, and we developed with our team in Japan a unique routing pattern. So it has like what we do is there's like a digital analysis that we do to make sure that the neck and the body vibrate in harmony, right? So yours is a little bit lighter.
I was talking about this the other day. This was sorry to cut across you again. This was something I had entered into a big discussion with someone on YouTube in regard to, I referenced a guitar I own being particularly, like I said, working in harmony. You feel as though the body and the neck are part of the same instrument, and they're not two bits that are just happen to be connected or bolted together or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was shot down in flames, as you know. Well, of course, that doesn't make a difference. How possibly can that make a difference? It's just the pickups. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I think anyone who's ever played a great sounding guitar, whether it's a new one or whether it's an old one, the one consistent trait that I seem to have found is this resonance and this an element of all the pieces seem to be working in harmony. This guitar is a perfect example of you strum a chord and almost the entire thing seems to vibrate. You can feel all of the kind of strings resonating throughout all of the guitar, you know, whether we're up to the headstock or whether we're down at the kind of body. And I think that inevitably is going to find its way into its electric sound. You know, it has to, it physically has to. So
everything, you know, has an influence. Everything has, and you know, some folks will say, oh, the pickups are the majority of the sound, or the body wood is, or the fingerboard is, but really it's the overall build quality, right? So I always think that the first most important part is like how well the neck and body join together.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a really tight tolerance there. Fortunately, we have access to some really fine machines, and you know, the neck in your guitar fits in the pocket so snugly that, you know, when I go to fit it in for the first time, it's usually just slightly too tight, and if I were to glue it that way, there wouldn't be much glue to hold it in place. So I just kiss it a little bit with some sandpaper until it fits perfectly, but it's usually somewhere around, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 thousandths of an inch clearance, you know, so it's really tight. So that thing to get the neck and body to communicate in that way is really important. And then like how well the bridge is fitted, how well the nut is, like, you know, how flat the bottom of it is it making all the contact with the neck? And, you know, like, are your tuners all tight? You know, is everything done the right way? And I think all those little things create, you know, that perfect scenario where it really does ring. And then when you strum it and you feel it up against your body, you feel the guitar, you know, vibrate. I think that's really important for to be inspired, right? So it's like when you're playing the guitar and then you hear it talk back to you. So you talk to the guitar by strumming it and playing, you know, whatever notes. Yeah, and then it sings back to you.
It's a kind of feedback loop, you know, and that's one of the things I love about this guitar is that it's sort of, again, I've kind of teeter perilously on the edge of sounding incredibly pretentious here, but again, one of the consistent traits in a lot of the incredible guitars I've been lucky enough to play is it almost kind of seems to anticipate what you're going to do to some bizarre, weird kind of, you know, I'm disappearing at my own sort of backside talking, you know, I can hear myself doing it, but there is this kind of synchronicity thing that goes on where it almost seems to anticipate what you're going to do and it's ready to kind of put it out. And again, it's, you know, great amps do that. You know, I love high headroom amps for that reason. They seem to be able to handle everything that you throw at them with ease. So
the telepathy circuit, you know, that we built in. So yeah, I mean, that it is true. Like, you know, when, especially with an amp too, like a larger amp, if you're playing at volume and stuff, if you kind of have this like back and forth, it is nice to have that kind of instant feedback from the amp and the guitar, and then they all kind of sing together. That's, you know, that's changing a lot these days. Well, now there's very few shows, but it's harder and harder to bring large amps places. So lots of folks are using the Helix. They're using the HX Stomp, HX Effects, just the Helix in general, or like the power cabs and stuff, because you can go to a venue, have your whole rig, your whole set list, everything in one little box.
Yeah.
And, you know, you don't have to bring a big honking tube amp with you, even though they're fun and we love them, of course. You know, it's kind of like how you communicate with your equipment is how you project your voice as a player. And I mean, for you, you've been doing it very well. You know, voted top blues guitar player in last year with Guitarist Magazine, which is incredible. You know, and coming from Wales, it's not the most common thing. You know, it's like, yeah, it's pretty awesome. You know, what has been your largest influence when it comes to playing, and then maybe hearing some music that makes you feel a certain way? Like what is that motivator for you?
Exactly that. I think, I think I've always been just very quick to sort of follow something I'll hear. So, when I was young, the biggest influence I had in the world was Slash and Guns N' Roses. That was the first band that I really latched on to in any big way. And, for a long time, I was very much the sort of the Slash devotee, down to the sort of wanting curly hair and a top hat to a kind of low slung Les Paul, And I guess as you get older, inevitably you start to take on more influences and you start to develop your own voice a little bit more. And I've always, this the kind of cliche saying that kids are like sponges. I think I've always been very sponge-like myself, if that's a sort of if that's a compliment that I can bestow upon myself, in that I've always been very quick to just expose myself to a lot of different influences, as many as possible, not try to pigeonhole myself in regard to what I listen or dismiss genres out of hand just because I think they won't necessarily appeal to me. There is literally something to be gained or something to be glean from any type of music, even if it's you picking up on something that you don't like and you wouldn't want to incorporate that into your own playing.
Sure.
I love listening to kind of younger players who you stumble across who are at the start of their journey, and
Hmm.
everyone has their own unique sort of idiosyncratic way of playing, and your own develops so subconsciously over time. It's my style of playing isn't, I guess, attributed to one person so much as it's attributed to near enough everyone I've listened to and felt inspired by over the years. And however much I try and sound like my heroes, I can't, because I'm me, whether I want to or
Sure.
not. I can't sound like Slash or whoever, or Derek Trucks or any of those guys, because I'm not Slash or I'm not Derek Trucks. So I'm only ever going to sound like myself ultimately. And I think you find your own voice through, as I said, an amalgam of all of your influences. So that's a big part of it in regard to just trying to turn myself on to any kind of form of music. My wife has very different music tastes to me,
Sure.
for the most part. So I listen to a lot of the stuff that she likes. Sacrilegiously, she turned me on to Led Zeppelin. It wasn't as though I didn't know. It wasn't as though I didn't know of Led Zeppelin's existence, but
Sure. Yeah.
they were a band that kind of passed me by a little bit, and
Yeah, well, hey, there's lots of stuff that like none of us have heard, just because it's like there's only so many hours in the day,
yeah, absolutely.
and just because you haven't heard something doesn't mean you might not enjoy it.
Yeah.
I mean, and I like what you're saying, that you're an amalgam of all your influences, but you still have to be yourself. And I when you said Derek Trucks, I was going to ask you a little bit, because I saw you holding your hand, and I
Mm.
see how you hold your pick, and
Yeah.
then kind of switch between playing with your fingers versus playing with a pick. And I like that technique a lot too. I remember when I was younger, I kind of dedicated a chunk of time, a few months,
Oh,
where
cool.
I played no pick.
Mm.
And now it's like, oh, I don't know if it's a crutch or not, but like I almost always use my hand and like my pick and three fingers. That's kind of like always been my technique in playing. But I really like seeing you play with finger style a little bit, and it made me think of Derek Trucks early on, because I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, it makes sense. But now that you say it, it sticks out a little bit more.
It's funny, the fingers thing developed a very long time ago, and I've referenced this in numerous kind of interviews and chats. And it literally, I think, if I was to try and pin it down to a reason I started doing it, it was that inevitable moment we all go through where we maybe drop a plectrum and it disappears into the ether,
Yeah,
or we find ourselves without a pick, and you have a guitar. Yeah, you have a guitar in your lap, and you still want to play. So I just thought, well, it makes sense, to just start playing with my fingers, and it felt very alien to start off with because, literally down to the first day I had my first ever guitar. You're given a guitar, it might have a strap on it, but you're given plectrums, and you
yeah,
play guitar with a plectrum. So why would you not play guitar with a plectrum? And then, of course, the older I get, the more I see guys like Jeff Beck, kind of very rarely relying on a plectrum, if ever. Derek Trucks plays with his fingers a lot, or John Martin is a big influence of mine. Kind of obviously an incredible acoustic player, but great electric player as well. Played with his fingers a hell of a lot, very percussively. So there's a lot of the influences that I've kind of. It's weird. It's almost as if I kind of did it in reverse order, in that I found the finger style thing prior to finding the guys who did that well. It's not as though I took influence from the guys who were doing the fingerstyle thing and then followed them, so much as, oh, right, this is what I'm doing. Oh, there's other people that do this too. Um,
Yeah.
so I kind of did it in reverse. You know, a lot of the way I learned to play guitar is kind of bass backwards, to be honest, as they say. A lot of it, you know, came in a very strange order. I had a few lessons, but I was kind of, for the most part, I found my own path and just learned in a very kind of retro way, I guess, generally speaking, of listening to something on the radio or on a CD player, and then trying to learn that and try and figure it out, you know. And subsequently, a lot of the stuff I do, I get a hell of a lot of abuse online in regard to not using my little finger.
Mm.
Just lots of strange little idiosyncrasies within my technique, I guess, which are a testament to the fact that I learned in a relatively strange way. But yeah, the fingers thing, you know, again, I take a bit of grief over, well, not grief so much as just people saying, why do you have the plectrum there anymore? Because you hardly ever use it. And I do use it. I like to alternate between the two, as you said. And my response is always, well, you know, I hope I don't need my car insurance, but I have it just in case I need it.
Good one.
Um,
Yeah. You know, when you said Jeff Beck, I always think of, you know, I heard this quote. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, but he said, you know, why would you put jeans on an Olympic swimmer? You know,
yeah.
he's like, I don't need the pick. And, you know, I see a lot of his influence in your playing, or, you know, maybe you came about it like calculus is invented in two places at the same time, you know, where you're doing a lot of like bends where you're moving up the neck and kind of matching notes and things, which I really like, where, you know, you play one note bent and then you play the note, you know, up a couple of frets unbent. You know, I really love that style of playing and stuff too. So I think that's a really great way to say it. It's like, I hope I don't need my car insurance, but I have it with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, you want to be prepared for every situation, right? So it's like a lot of folks find, you know, what the right size pick is or whatever, but you need to be able to, if you have to, you use what you got. So it's like, hey, there's no pick today. Okay, I figured it out. Or you know, whatever it is, or you know, you only have a Jazz 3, or you only have just a standard pick, or whatever it is. So
or that moment inevitably at a gig where you drop your plectrum and there's a couple of seconds of you either scrabbling back to your amp to grab one off the top or grab one from the mic stand. And if you can get by those few seconds without panicking too much and just using your fingers, then more power to it. You know, it's just, I think it's one more thing in my armory, and you know, I would encourage people to give it a go. You know, I know there's a lot of strong advocates of not using a pick altogether. You know, obviously Richie Kotzen, people like that are a great example of why you may never need a plectrum ever again. You know, I'm not Richie Kotzen as much as I may try, you know. So I have it there for the moments where I think, as much as anything, it's funny, people hone in on it on YouTube, you know, or Instagram or wherever I post a video, because it's almost a kind of novel thing at this point, you know, kind of watching me kind of flick back and forth between them. And you know, I like to think I don't play up to it to any degree, you know, because I know people latch onto it. But it really is a case of just trying to draw more dynamics out of my playing, I guess, or more textures. Because ultimately, as much as I may try and play softly with a plectrum, it's still going to sound like a plectrum because it is a plectrum. You know, it will always sound inherently different to the tip of my finger, which is flat.
The tack and things. Yeah, actually, so let's go back to that dynamic part, and you know, go back to the guitar itself. Now, one of the unique features about your 502 is that you actually don't have tone control. It's two volume controls, two separate volume controls. And you asked for that because you said, I rarely use the tone control. And then initially we were thinking about doing the 4-knob setup where it's like 2 volumes, 2 tones. But when you lay it out on the guitar, and you know, we went back and forth sharing some photos and stuff, it looks a little different. It's not really like the Revstar
look.
Or look. So we were like, okay, let's just go with 2 volume controls. We can always add more stuff later if we have to. You know, so when you play, you do a lot of, you know, volume knob work. And some guys do more, you know, with a volume pedal, or they do it with their, just the way that they do gain staging with their amps or presets or whatever it is. So, you know, how important are those dynamics to you and using those, you know, volume knobs when you're playing a set, or like, you know, not only recording but playing live and things like that.
Absolutely huge. I think the volume control is the kind of built-in effect that we all have, that we all forget about, or we all don't give it its due diligence. I did a video about this a couple of months ago and had a huge response in regard to people saying, "Oh, I'm glad you did this. I needed reminding of, there is actually a volume control on my guitar." And it may not be as fun as buying new pedals or, kind of buying a new Helix patch or experimenting with a different amp. I
Yeah.
can't say it is as fun as that, but you have so many sounds just built into your guitar without even worrying about anything else. And finding volume pots with the right taper or a tone control with the right taper is as essential as anything else, any other part of my rig, really. And as you said, I ride the volume pots a hell of a lot, just because I think this, again, it's all in the kind of name of dynamics, and whether that's going back and forth between my plectrum and my fingers, or using different overdrive pedals stacked together, or
Yeah.
using the volume control on my guitar. The more control I have over dynamics, the happier I am, because the more I feel I can express myself. And ultimately, that's the gigs I've most enjoyed in my life are the ones where I feel like everything is kind of going my way, and I feel like I'm in control of everything. Sounds a little bit sort of narcissistic and control freakish, I guess.
Oh no, it's true. Like you need to feel like you have agency on stage, right? Like
Absolutely, yeah. If you're in control of everything that's happening, and the kind of mix around you is right. And funny, I'm in a conversation with a friend of mine the other day. I've done so many gigs throughout my life where I've never had any form of monitoring, whether it's kind of wedding gigs over the years, when I was younger, or kind of pub or club shows, whatever. No form of monitoring. So I've just got so used at this point to just, if I can hear myself and I can hear the drummer, I'm happy. I want to lock in on that kind of 2 and that 4 or whatever.
yeah.
That's me fine. And obviously, the older I get and the bigger the shows we play, the more control you suddenly have over every little nuance that's coming through your monitor. And I'm a sound man's dream in that respect, in that 95% of the time, I'm just, as long as the last thing on earth I want is my guitar in my monitor, because no matter how good their microphones are, no matter how good their monitors are, you can guarantee it will sound like a bee in a can.
Yeah.
So if I can get away with absolutely no guitars in my monitors, I'm happy. And to that end, I've grown up setting the guitar to a level where I'm happy and I can hear it on stage. I don't want to be blowing everyone else away. That's not conducive to a good show for anyone. But working the volume control from there has always been my kind of greatest effect. It's the one I get the most use out of.
And it's a good way to trick your sound guy too, right? So what you do is they ask you for the level, and then you roll it back just a little bit. You tuck the volume back a little bit, and you say, yeah, here it is. This is it. This is as loud as it's going to get. And then
never ever done that.
Solo, you let it rip. You open it up. You open the tap.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah. So okay, let's go back to some questions here. So 502 is chambered, for what I read. How much it differs in what compared to a stock 502, right? So yours is a little different. We talked about, it's got the ebony fingerboard, right? That's a big difference. Obviously, the color and being chambered. We really tried to keep it pretty stock, though. This guitar is very, very similar to what you can get at a store. And if you were to get, like Chris had, the stock 502, they're really quite similar. There's a difference in like a pickup swap. So
let me grab it. Actually, it's very close to hand, so I'll grab it for reference.
Yeah. So a stock 502 has the wonderful Yamaha pickups, which everybody really seems to love. But we've been using Lawlers on a lot of custom shop instruments. The bridge on Chris's Gold Top is a little different too. We use the ABM solid brass bridge as opposed to the stock one on the Revstars that has like adjustable saddle heights and things. The stock bridge is a little bit easier to adjust, actually, but we mix it up with different parts. The binding color is slightly different. We chose like a more traditional style. And the color on the back is more like a traditional brown, as opposed to like the dark kind of more chocolate brown that's on the stock guitars. But really, it's the same guitar for the most part. Tuner change a little bit, a little different. Um, but if you were to do some of these mods to a stock 502, you can get it to sound like Chris's guitar really quickly. You know, you ring up ABM, you ring up Lawler pickups, you get a bone nut and, you know, installed and things. You're pretty much there. So
something I was quite conscious of actually when we were kind of going back and forth and talking about the design of the guitar and what it was going to entail. As much as I guess the temptation is when you know you have the kind of run of the custom shop, and I could have had you doing some crazy stuff. As much as that temptation is there, I was very much aware of the fact that if I was going to have this and I was going to play it publicly, I didn't want to do something that was too far removed for many reasons, but too far removed from the kind of Revstar thing that I'd fallen in love with up until this point, whether it was aesthetically or whether it was functionally. Obviously, you made reference earlier to the two volume controls as opposed to two tones. Funnily enough, since I've had the guitar, I changed that back to a tone control, and then I changed it back to a volume control. So it's been through a couple of different iterations, and I kind of get my head around it, you know.
nice.
So I wanted to kind of keep it within the kind of realms of, as you said, what you would get if you just went into a store and bought a stock 502. But I guess, you know, the weight, having compared the two weights, then there's really not much in it. I would say the stock one is a little bit heavier. Obviously, this is chambered, but it's not as though the stock 502 is a heavy guitar by any stretch, you know. So
no, it's not a huge log. You know, I'm not always a fan of the lightest guitar, because sometimes you can go too light. I'm definitely not a fan of just like a boat anchor 10-pound guitar or something like that. That's a little heavy. Although I have made some heavy guitars in my day, that's for sure. Some things just play out that way. But your guitar is probably, I think when we weighed it, somewhere around 7 pounds, 7 1/4, something like that. Whereas the typical Revstar 502 might be 8 pounds.
Yeah.
You know, which is very reasonable. And you know, it depends on like what style of playing you do too, right? So typically I wouldn't recommend a chambered guitar to somebody who's going to be playing like death metal, just because it can it has a different like bass response, right? So if you want a little bit tighter sounding bass, you might go with a solid body versus like the chambered, which is like a little bit more airy. It's really great for blues. It's great for rock. It's great for all sorts of things. Also, you know, kind of you combine it with the P90s and things. So it's a great combo.
It is a very airy sounding guitar. There's a lot of kind of trailing harmonics that you seem to get after it's finished, kind of ringing out. It's such a, as I said, it's such a resonant guitar. You know, whether that's the quality of the wood, the craftsmanship, or the kind of the chambering, or as you said earlier, more likely a combination of everything, all of the above. I think it's everything with this guitar just seems to sort of, it's this confluence of all of its sort of great factors. You know, it's just such a great sounding guitar. But as you said, to answer the question, just kind of more aesthetics, I guess, as much as anything else. You know, obviously the gold is something people seem to have really latched onto. The idea of a gold top Revstar, with the kind of light back as opposed to the dark back. But
so those are things that you know, like an artist like yourself gets to pick. And, you know, when you said gold top, I was excited because we do a gold Revstar 420, the Maya gold, and that's a little bit different. That's more of like a copper look. It's a little warmer brown in that respect versus yours, which is actually, it's an extracellulose finish, first of all. And then the gold itself is actually brass powder. It's like brass dust that we just put a couple of spoonfuls into clear nitro, and then you spray that, and then you put clear over the top of it to seal it in. But as you wear through that top clear coat, you'll start to hit the brass, you know, little grains, and it'll start to turn green a little bit like the original. And then we did, you know, the finish checking, right? So you make it crackle a little bit. So it's like very slightly aged. And initially we put a cream pickguard on this guitar.
Yeah.
to match and then, you know, you were in the shop, and well, whenever I build a guitar for someone, you know, I always try and give them all the options that I can. So we went over like all the different pickguard colors, all the different knob colors. You know, what covers do you want on the pickups? Do you want, you know, black pickup covers? Do you want cream? Do you want metal with, you know, the metal bezels? You know, the list goes on and on. And so let's go to this question. Yeah, so this guitar I made for Chris. How many do we make? I think last year they said I made like 50 guitars or something like that, which is, I don't believe that. I honestly don't even know. I don't keep track. But Chris's was one of my favorites for sure. When it came out.
All the girls.
No, yeah, I know. Well, actually, you know, there are some projects that I get where I'm like, oh, this is just hard. I can't wait for it to leave my bench because I'm just like, you know, it's difficult, or, you know, whatever it is. Some guitars though, like I plug them in and I'm just like, oh man, it's hard. It's like you spend all this time and you do all this work and then like you have to give your baby away.
Yeah.
So that's why it's like, you know, you get you know, involved in it a little bit. So I loved your guitar because I love the color choice. I love that you wanted simple. And honestly, you were one of the only guys that asked for P90s. And I'm a big P90 fan, single coil fan. So that was really fun for me.
Sorry, cutting across you again. I think
No.
P90s are such a criminally underrated pickup. I've said this in numerous videos, you know, and
Really?
still people seem amazed when they see me playing P90 guitars. I think as much as I love more kind of traditional single coils, obviously P90s are single coils, but, and, you know, as much as I love a good set of PAFs, you know, I think P90s are the best all-round pickup, I would say, in that I don't think there's anything that you kind of, or anything that you would want to do that you can't do on a P90. You know, within reason. They're just such a, and I think it's testament to the fact that when, you know, when the PAF was developed, or the idea of, you know, kind of more kind of widely available humbucking pickup, I think the aim was to make it sound like a P90, but without the hum. So
Yeah.
that explains the tonality of a lot of those early PAFs I have played, you know, those kind of magic quote unquote pickups that will set you back a couple of $1,000s. There's a lot of kind of characteristics in those pickups and in those guitars, which I would recognize from P90 loaded guitars as well. That, like you said, that airiness and that there's a kind of depth and a meatiness there, but still a really sweet sort of treble response. There's such a well-rounded pickup. I think it quite happily does everything and anything.
Yeah, a true single coil I really love, because you do, it's like there's no impediment to the sound. Like a humbucker is great because, you know, you don't have the 60 cycle hum, or 50 on your side of the pond, right? But the you know, you do take away some of that dynamic. So P90s, because the coil it's relatively flat but kind of wide, it has like this larger area that it's sensing, right? And you know, if you talk to some pickup makers, they say it's like a camera, right? It's like how wide, you know, is the shot, how quickly does the open and close, right? So a P90 is sensing a certain portion of the string. It's a true single coil, but it has two magnets like you would in a humbucker, whereas like a humbucker only has one magnet in the middle. The P90 has like two of those, so they're pretty powerful sounding pickups. And if you don't play with a huge amount of gain or under some crazy lights, it's great. You know, so the only issue really is the noise. So yeah, actually, there's some questions here. What's my preference of guitar style to build, and do I have my own model? I think you might be asking. I definitely don't have my own model, although, you know, I don't know if I could pin anything down for myself. But when it comes to building, really, I like building all sorts of different stuff. Really, the thing I think I enjoy the most working for Yamaha is every day is a new challenge. Every day, I'm not making the same guitar over and over and over again. And I make the whole thing by myself, 100% soup to nuts. Although the finish is with Raphael. Raphael is my partner in crime at the shop, and he does all the wonderful paint jobs. And I love working with him. So it really, if I could pick something for myself, it'd probably be something like Chris's guitar, honestly. Just something simple. All I want is a volume and a tone control and, you know, a blade switch. And that's about it, because like you said, you have the pick in your hand. And if you drop it, you might want to grab something. I don't even have the wherewithal to switch the switches or change things on the guitar. You know, it's just like you have to be able to move quickly, and I like simple. So actually, like a Pacifica single cut, or just a normal Pacifica, or like a Revstar, just something simple, has always been my favorite. So you know, the P90 pickups, the first guitar I made for myself had a P90 in it. So that goes to show I've been a fan myself. So
I think the older we get, I think everyone starts to veer back towards simplicity a little bit more. I think when you're younger, it's cool to kind of go through all configurations of all the switches under the sun, to have every configuration that you could ever dream of. And I
yeah,
think the older I get, the less I want to distract me, really.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember in high school, right? And I still have one of these. This is like a you know, squared notebook, right? And what I would do is, you know, the Guitar World magazines would always show like the rig, you know, of certain artists or something like that. So I would build my own on the pad and draw up some amps and things. And like you said, you know, you always want to try all these different things. Um, uh, Unfortunately, when I was coming up, there was no Chris Buck to show me great things on Fretwork Fridays. You know, pedals, pickups, amps, all sorts of stuff like that. So all I could do was imagine. But nowadays, you know, we have guys like you that are just like killing it, making great stuff. You know, and people really get to learn. They get to learn a lick from you. They get to learn about tone. They get to learn about how to build a cool rig. And I think your experience really is helpful to so many people. So yeah, thanks for doing that.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. When I started playing, YouTube was very much in its infancy.
Sure.
Um, and I remember the first time I ever watched a kind of quote unquote video on YouTube, and it was actually a GIF image someone had made into a video and posted to YouTube. And
Oh,
they
no
kind
kidding.
and that was it kind of, oh right, the internet moves. Things move on screen. I've never seen any kind of videos on my computer up until that point. It had been maybe clip art or word art within Word, you know. So it was very much in its infancy, and I think it's inherently a very good thing to have this incredible resource at your fingertips. You know, if you are learning to play guitar, this, you know, not to kind of do people out of work, but I think I kind of would probably be able to kind of find my way to a decent level on a guitar just through watching people I like, you know, and kind of copying what they're doing, or maybe taking lessons online. I
Yeah.
think it's such an incredible resource. So, like you said, it's a shame that it wasn't there when I was young, but I think in retrospect, I had so much fun sticking on a CD and pausing it and rewinding it, uh,
Yeah.
trying to figure out what that note was, you know. So I think as much as it is great to be able to go on YouTube and just find out what that note is because someone's broken down the solo,
Sure.
you know, I had such fun just kind of rewinding and sort of strenuously listening to try and figure out what stuff was. It's like I said, it was the next evolution of people trying to sort of move the needle back on a Buddy Holly record or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
John Paul, Joel and Ringo, George and Ringo trying to figure out what what, I don't know, whoever it was doing. So sorry, offered another tangent.
No, no, I think that's right. You know, it used to be you had to pick up the needle, right, and move it back. And you know, if you slowed it down, then the tone went down, right? So it's like really hard to figure out tunes. And you know, a lot of respect to folks that learn that way. I think it's really good for ear training. And I think your playing is a lot of, you know, picking up by ear, you know, how to harmonize with your compatriots there on the stage, right? So you know, when I see you solo and stuff, it's like you're really listening and not really doing like what Scott Holiday called was like popping a wheelie guitar solo. It's more like tasteful. It's more like you're really listening. You're contributing to the music, you know, and it's not like some big crazy flashy, you know, sweep arpeggio thing. Not to say that that's, bad in any way. I always wanted to learn that stuff too. I learned a bunch of that, but
Yeah, its place, and I think, like, that stuff has its place, and that stuff works within the context of that style of music. You use Scott as an example. I love Rival Sons, and I've seen them numerous times. And one of the cool things about Rival Sons is, as you said, this sort of connectivity between all the guys. Whether it's on a kind of syncopation level, or whether it's on a kind of Jay and Scott seem to kind of play off one another. There's so much happening where you can tell that each member is listening to the other member. And I think that is very much reflected in the music then. It's such a cohesive experience because of it. It's not, the guitarist taking his 30 seconds, as Scott said, to pop a wheelie and
yeah,
go show you everything that he knows and all the notes he can play within those 30 seconds. On the last album, there's some absolutely blinding solos from Scott, which are just the essence of simplicity, just a couple of notes, which, kind of maybe echo the melody or provide another melody almost. It's, I think a big part of that is having musicians around you who you trust and who as well, more to the point. Again, to use an analogy, it's not about having the best gear, as long as you know the gear that you do have inside out. And I don't
yeah.
think it's about playing with the best musicians, and I sound like I'm giving a very backhanded compliment to the musicians in my band here. They're all amazing musicians.
Oh, great. Buck and Evans, amazing.
But because I've played with them so much, I can kind of second guess what they're going to do. And myself and Bob, the drummer, the amount of times that we end up in synchronicity, or we'll almost do the same sort of fill, same rhythmic fill. And he's always amazed by it, and he loves it as much as I do. But I think he's quite happy to put it down to sort of, I don't know, some sort of spontaneous kind of mind connection we have. Whereas more likely, it's just the fact that we play together so frequently, we're able to second guess what each of us is going to do. And if you feel that there's a section coming up where this would be tasteful, odds on we're kind of at the same wavelength. So you end up being in harmony with each other a lot of the time. And I think if you have musicians around you that you trust and who's playing that you like, you're likely to follow them that little bit more. And Bob is a great example. Like I said, Dominic, bless him, our bass player, an incredible bass player, but I can never hear what the hell he's doing. He's on the other side of the stage. He was testing me actually at sound check just before lockdown, where he was kind of running through some settings on his bass amp and decided to play some of the bass lines from our tracks. And these are songs that primarily I've written, and then he's come up with the bass lines too, and he's playing bass lines saying, "What's this from?" I'm like, "I don't know." He's like, "Well, that's that track that you wrote." And I probably should pay more attention to what he's doing.
We got to get him a BB and an Ampeg, and get him going. If you can't hear, that's great. Yeah.
But it's like you said, it's being aware of what's happening around you and kind of playing to that a little bit. And as long as I can be the drummer, I've always been happy because I follow him, So that way, if I speed up, it's not my fault.
Yeah, and I was wondering, maybe you could play us a little ditty, a little tune, something like that. Do you have anything lined up?
Camera down, but it might just be easier if I stand up. Let's have a look. See if,
Here we go. Nice. That's awesome. Thank you, man. Well, the bending that you're playing, and you know, it is very soulful. I think that's the key, you know, and I think playing with other musicians, right, instead of always just playing to a video or something like that, even though, you know, being at home, we don't always have the luxury of it, but play with your fellow musicians and, you know, learning your audience, learning the room, that is like something that I think you really personify in your playing. So kudos to you. That it sounds great. You know, the guitar itself doesn't make any sound. It's the player that plays it that makes the sound. So I think that, you know,
So
say it again. I'm sorry.
having a good one helps.
Yeah, you know, a little bit. So, you know, let's just wrap up here by talking about Fretwork Fridays. You have a new video coming out tomorrow, correct?
Yes, I do, on the Pod Go, which still blows my mind to open it up, fire it up, and see that I have my name kind of built into it as one of the factory presets. I'm just glad as well that the Line 6 guys went with just my name as opposed to any number of the absolutely terrible Buck-related puns that so
Yeah.
it was a relief to get the NAM and just see Chris Buck written in there as opposed to any of the terrible ones I came up with. But yeah, I've got a video on that coming out tomorrow that I shot, and just kind of digging into it and getting used to it. I mean, I've spent so much time with the Helix that I was kind of instantly sort of familiar with the kind of layout of it, I guess, although it is a bit different. So I was intrigued to dig into it and just see how much functionality it had. And I mean, in terms of sounds, it's the same as the Helix, it's the same as the Stomp, so it sounds just every bit as good as those guys, but just in a kind of smaller form factor, I guess, ultimately. So I can see myself getting a lot of use. I make the point in tomorrow's video that for one or two shows I do where, you know, kind of maybe local jam nights when we're allowed outside again, that I've done in the past, where turning up with the Helix is has kind of crossed my mind as to doing, you know, that would make sense because I would have all my sounds at my feet. It's still a fairly big bit of gear, and it would feel a little bit ostentatious turning up at a kind of relaxed jam night with something as in depth and as kind of sophisticated as the Helix. Whereas the Pod Go, throw that in the front of your guitar bag, a couple of leads, guitar away, and you don't look like, to use a phrase, Billy Big Bollocks, turning up, spreading yourself over the stage, making it very much known that you've arrived. You know, the ego has landed.
Yeah. The ego is landed. I like that. That's really great. And yeah, speaking of Helix, you sell your own patch, correct?
I do, yeah. It's on my website, and it makes you sound exactly like me, which is amazing. No, it's just, you know, I spent a lot of time dialing in the Helix, getting the amp sounds the way I want, and obviously then kind of building effects on top of that. My brain is not formed to the extent where I can quite get my head around banks and all that kind of fun stuff. So the way I set it up was basically as I would work my normal pedal board. So each switch is assigned to an effect. And there's no snapshots within that or anything. Literally is assigned as to how I use it live, which is one effect off, one effect on, you know.
Yeah.
Because that's all my brain can handle. But I love it, and I get a hell of a lot of use out of it. I mean, a great example was last summer we did a fly date in Czech Republic, in Prague, that we flew in for literally the one gig, and I did a clinic over there as well, but that was it, and then we flew home. And you know, that is the perfect scenario for the Helix, because they made sure there was a power cab waiting, they made sure there was a Helix waiting. All I had to do was plug my MacBook into the Helix, download my preset onto the Helix, and you're away. And then suddenly you're on stage in front of a couple of thousand people with all of your sounds, but in a totally foreign country where you haven't had to worry about whether the airline are going to throw your pedal board off a cliff, you know? So
yeah, it's your rig waiting for you there when you arrive. It's amazing.
Absolutely. It's
great.
It's an astonishing bit of gear, you know. It's, and like I said, I feel I know how to use I know how to use it to the extent that I want to use it, but I find new stuff every day that I didn't know it did. So I've discovered such a small percentage of it, you know. So when
that's the same for me. It's like I'm so focused on the instrument itself. Like all the things the Helix can do is just like my brain can't handle it. You know, it's yeah. So where can people get more info on you? They can go to your website, right? Which is chrisbookguitar.co.uk.
Yeah, .co.uk, MySpace, Bebo. LinkedIn, all of the good social media sites. No, Instagram, Facebook, all that kind of fun stuff. Like you said, this YouTube, I do a weekly YouTube show as well for my sins. But yeah, Instagram, Facebook, all the kind of usual ones. And chrisbuckguitar.co.uk is my own website. buckandevans.com is the band's website, although that's looking fairly sort of sparse at the minute because all the gigs we had planned are obviously been canned for the time being. But yeah, I'm looking forward to getting out and sort of actually seeing some people again and making some noise. I think the closest I've come was I set up my amp in my wife's parents' garage the other day, just as somewhere I knew I could make a bit of noise for an hour or so without being too disturbed, or kind of having the neighbors kind of clamp the doors. And it was great fun. So I'm looking forward to actually getting out and doing that and getting paid for it again. So,
yeah. Great. Well, folks, please go check out Chris Buck's YouTube. Check out his website, all his great tunes. Please support him because he supports us. And thank you very much, Chris, for joining me today. Look forward to seeing you in person, hopefully again sometime soon.
And again, but we'll see.
Yeah, maybe we'll meet up in Japan or something. It seems like things are going well over there. So
awesome. Absolutely, man. Nice. Right. Thank you for having me.
Cheers,
guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care, guys.